Welcome to Out Loud, a comedy podcast where I talk with queer comedians about identity as well as just talk and shop about the comedy community. I'm your host, Corbin Willmorth, and I'm here because, well, what comedian just doesn't have a podcast nowadays? Welcome to Out Loud. So you may have noticed this week I don't have a guest, so we're going to be doing another mini episode, one in which I feel like I want to talk about something important, which is why representation matters in comedy spaces, why queer representation matters. But before we get into that, I feel like I need to talk about something here at the top of the show. Okay, I'm fucking kidding. I'm fucking kidding. Imagine if I started this shit off with a ukulele apology. Oh my god. But that said, though, I do need to talk about something. And for those of you who don't really necessarily care about like what little shopkeeping I have to do at the front here, I'll insert like a chapter so you can skip ahead, or you can just skip to 9 minutes and 30 seconds. So very recently, while I was talking with some other queer comics in Spokane about like getting them on my podcast, it was kind of explained to me that I've been kind of giving off this vibe about my podcast, which I did not realize was kind of a vibe I was giving off, and also is just, anyway, I feel like I need to kind of explain myself a little bit. The entire purpose of my podcast is that I want to give airtime to queer voices. That is it. Full stop. I, as an individual, have not been as involved with my local queer community as much as I wish I was. And it's kind of because of this that I was kind of giving the wrong impression. I was kind of giving off this impression, at least how it was explained to me, that like I'm trying to insert myself, and I might be like phrasing this wrong, but like trying to like become like the face of queer comedy in the Spokane area, which is not at all what I'm trying to do here. Become the face of it, as well as like speaking on the behalf of the community. At the very least, this is how I understood the conversation. If I am wrong and the people who explain this to me are listening right now, please feel free to correct me. My goal is that I want queer voices to be heard. And as of right now, I am starting locally. I would love to get like my local funny queer voices, just get them in the air, give them airtime, give them an outlet to just talk about whatever insane bullshit they want to talk about. I just want that out there. And I would even love to have this podcast reach outside of just my local area. And I would love to even talk to people like all over the country, all over the world. Like, I just want people to know that we are a community that exists. And while there is like a lot of discussion about like this like positive side of comedy, this negative side of comedy, I just want to show that not only is it not all bad, but also there is a place where any people belong. And if I've been giving off an impression that is anything other than that, I genuinely feel sorry. Like, I'm sorry that this was... Okay, train, you can have your fucking moment, goddamn. The point that I'm trying to make is that I feel like I've been losing the plot a little bit about what the purpose of this podcast was. And I'm sorry for kind of letting that get ahead of me. And this is one thing that no one really mentioned, but I feel like I want to kind of explain a little bit, is that like I know I make jokes about like, you know, like ads and money and shit like that, but like yeah, I sell ads on this podcast, but that's because like, you know, it's not really free to make this podcast. It costs me $16 a month to put it on the service that I use to get it put everywhere. And also it costs me money to like go and meet these people, either gas or bus fare, etc. And I especially want to get to a point where I am paying my podcast guests. Because I know a lot of people will, when I reach out to them, be like, oh yeah, like I'd love to have my voice be heard. I'd love to do this. I'd love to do that. And they would just, agree to do it. But I know that for a lot of other people, they're like, oh yeah, I'd love to be on your podcast. I'd love to hear my voice heard, but like, mind helping a broke bitch out? And I just want to be able to like compensate the people that I speak with. I mean, as it is currently, I've kind of been paying my guests with like snack food, which like I gave Jenny a bag of Hostess donuts. I gave Thomas, aka Automatron, a body armor, the orange mango one, I think. I bought one for them, one for myself. And then Chris Jessup, we kind of went out for coffee. But yeah, like that's kind of just so far how I've been able to pay my guests within my budget. I'd love to give them actual money. And considering with the ad revenue and just the listenership, I'm currently making like a penny a month. I don't think I can split that up between people evenly. Now more than ever, considering the penny's deader than fucking disco. And then this is the final point I'm going to have before we finally get into this episode. I will tend to promote myself like on this podcast. I mean, like, I feel like that just kind of comes with the territory as being a podcast host. I plug my own shit as well as my guests' shit. But recently I plugged a performance that I did at a venue in Spokane that is not exactly the most queer friendly. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a great venue. They host a lot of queer comics, like not local queer comics, but like, like world famous, country, nationally famous queer comics. And it's not that the venue itself necessarily is like homophobic, but it's more that as they host like any comedian in Spokane, as they do open mic nights, because they draw like any comedian there, whether it's like a famous comedian or just like, some local guy just trying to hit up an open mic, there tend to just be a lot of unqueer friendly voices and unqueer friendly jokes, which, like, as Spokane, while we do live in one of the most progressive states that there is, it's not exactly the most welcoming of a city. I'm not going to say the name of the venue, as I'd rather not, like, get banned from performing there ever again. But, like, if you are part of the local, like, queer community, especially the queer comedy community here in Spokane, then you know what venue I'm talking about. So I think all of this is just suffice to say that I will no longer be plugging myself performing at that venue on the podcast. Like, I'll still maybe mention it like here and there on social media, but on the podcast I will not be plugging myself going to places that I know are not 100% queer safe, as I don't want to give people the idea that they should come and then they're like not going to hear someone say some horrendous shit. And I know even saying this, I'm probably going to get some shit for it, especially from like non-queer people. But like my whole thing is I want queer people to be comfortable. I want queer people to be safe. I'm promoting queerness. And if queerness is not allowed in that space, or at the very least it is kind of unsafe to a point where queerness does not feel like it's allowed, then I'm just not going to tell people to fucking go there. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of what this episode is about. So before we even talk about queer representation in comedy spaces or just comedy as a whole, I feel like we should talk about what I mean when I say queer representation. When you look up the word representation in the dictionaries, specifically Oxford, two definitions pop up. The first being the action of speaking or acting on behalf of someone or the state of being so represented. And the second is the description or portrayal of someone or something in a particular way or as being of a certain nature. According to connectnorthshore.org, the importance of LGBTQ representation in media is because, and I quote, it validates their identities, experiences, and emotions. This representation tells them that their love, their struggles, and their dreams are just as valid and important as everyone else's. It fosters a sense of belonging, reminding them that they are part of a broader human narrative. Now, of course, this is how the internet defines queer representation. Growing up as a person who kind of falls under the queer umbrella, it kind of comes with the territory that you're going to get a lot of shit. Even if you surround yourself with some of the most loving, caring, and accepting people that there are, there's always going to be someone who, for some fucking reason, just has a problem with you existing. And I'm kind of just speaking for myself here. I can't really speak for, every queer individual, but that kind of thing is kind of just why I'm kind of an anxious adult now. Like, being a queer person kind of has this like stigma around it, especially if, like, say you came up in like an area where, like, I don't know, for example, this isn't like the definitive thing, but for example, like, say you grow up in like kind of like a religious community and they're always like pushing this narrative that, like, gay is evil, gay is this, gay is that, and you kind of like feel like you aren't normal. So when you watch, for example, a piece of media that features a queer person like being treated like a human being, it really makes me feel like valid. It makes me feel valid, and it ultimately reminds me that it's okay for me to like be who I am, and that I shouldn't try to hide it, It's okay to, be attracted to not the person you're societally supposed to be attracted to. It's okay to not identify as the certain role that you're supposed to identify as in society. Like, it's fine, like it's like I apologies, this isn't really something I've ever like vocalized before. Like, these are all thoughts that I've had, but I've never really had to express them into words before, so I'm getting a little flustered here. But I feel like I'm making my point. Am I making my point? I don't know. Email the show. Email the show and let me know. I try not to comment on like the trans and non-binary community because as a cis white man, I feel like definitely I shouldn't. But all I'm going to say is this. I have a fiance who I hope to marry soon. We're waiting 4 years to kind of just see how the fuck this is all going to shake out. And for context, I should probably preference this. My fiance is trans. And whenever a trans person exists in media that, isn't a stereotype or like the butt of a fucking Family Guy joke, I see this like light up in his eyes. And seeing that light gives me just this great sense that my fiance feels good. And that makes me feel good, So I put out a post recently to try to get some feedback from listeners where I said I was doing this episode where I wanted to talk about why queer representation is important, not just in general, but also in comedy spaces. And while that post got a ton of likes, I did not get a single email or DM. And that's not gonna, feed into my anxiety and keep me awake at night. So much like any other cis white man who is trying to make content for the internet, I am just going to steal stuff from Reddit. I'm going to be looking at 2 posts here. The first one was posted 4 years ago in r/LGBT, and it is titled, "Why is representation important to you all?" And the first comment that I see comes from user Titan_Odyssey, which just simply says, "Because straight people are boring." That's fucking valid. Survivor_fan10 commented, Because it's disheartening to grow up thinking that feeling the way you do is wrong, and seeing no positive representation cements that. Only seeing yourself in TV show villains sends the message that, quote, I must be a villain for feeling this way, end quote. Cishet people are represented, blah, 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 blah. Represented, that's the fucking word, everywhere, and in feeling that we've had to fight for crumbs of representation. I want trans kids to see themselves in main characters in TV shows and movies. I want LGBTQ plus kids and families to see themselves representation in random jewelry commercials and family holiday commercials. The second post I'm going to be looking at is from r/AskLGBT, and the title is LGBTQ plus representation in media. What are your thoughts? This was posted 2 years ago, by the way. And this is the top comment, which comes from user altaccount_T. I think representation is important. The amount of queer rep out there has improved recently, but I feel like there's still a long way to go. I feel like it would have meant a lot to me to have seen someone else like me when I felt completely alone. I find it helps when people have already come across people like me in good works of fiction, and I don't have to explain things to them because they've had that crash course in what it means and how to act around people in the same situation from fictional characters. I find it kind of sad how rare it is to see characters like me who I can actually relate to, who have been made by someone who has put in the effort to try to understand, but fewer still in sort of things I already enjoy. It'd mean a lot to me to see something where a trans man is the hero. That said, I think there's a lot of representation, quote unquote, which I don't think is handled well, especially the sort that just feels shallow, especially the trend of confirming a character's LGBT plus on Twitter or in con panels without actually putting in the effort to show it, or making a huge amount of fuss and marketing about a new film having a LGBT plus character, only for them to be a nameless extra on screen for a few seconds who can be easily edited out for the release in countries with stricter censorship. I feel like it's still pretty common to rely on tropes or stereotypes, and the same handful of plot lines tend to be rehashed. I think telling a wider range of stories is great, and there's still a lot of stories out there that are rarely told, and rarer still, handled well and done justice. I want to see characters who just happen to be LGBT+, in a wider range of genres beyond just fluffy YA romance / coming of age drama focused on coming out or sad Oscar bait biopic where they die horribly, where there is no need for fanfare over it, and there is more to them than the labels that apply. As for good examples, I really like the way Jonathan Sims handles queer representation in his work, especially in the Magnus Archives and 13 Stories. Although everything he's written has featured LGBT plus main characters, I have not consumed, personally, this is me speaking, this is not part of the comment that I'm reading, I have not consumed enough of the Magnus Archives. That's more of my fiance's thing. Todd from BoJack Horseman was probably the first canonically asexual character I'd seen who'd resonated with me too. I also feel that. Like, genuinely. Like, I feel like Todd, like, wait. Now I'm genuinely questioning if there have been any other asexual characters in media other than just Todd from BoJack Horseman. Okay, hold up, I'm Googling this. Okay, what the fuck? I Googled canonical asexual characters in media, and literally the first fucking result is Todd from BoJack Horseman. And then Jughead from Riverdale was... I haven't seen enough of Riverdale, so I can't confirm that. Pavarti Holcomb from The Outer Worlds. She's not asexual. She's a lesbian. You literally do a whole quest where you're trying to help her get some fucking... Okay. And then it says Sherlock, which I don't fucking believe, because we know that with all the queer baiting in that show, he's pining for that little Twinkie army doctor. Okay, Alistair from Hazbin Hotel. That I feel like I already knew, but just forgot about. This list also mentions Bilbo Baggins from The Hobbit, but I'm not... That wasn't confirmed, so I'm not counting that. Anyway, I got way too distracted, but to finish up, the comment. So Todd from BoJack Horseman was probably the first canonically asexual character I'd seen who resonated with me too. I feel like podcasts tend to have a better track record than other forms of media. Welcome to Night Vale and Critical Role also stand out as good examples. The reason I brought up these Reddit posts just to begin with is because I wanted to get perspectives outside of my own as to what people's opinions on representation are. Representation is. A better idea as to what representation is and what it means to other people. Now, as for what representation means in comedy spaces, that is something I will get into right after the ad break. Alright, welcome to the ad break, and I of course just want to start this off by thanking everyone for tuning in. The fact that people even tune in and listen to this podcast whenever I put out episodes, to me just feels really great, and it kind of gives me a sense, not only just like a sense of accomplishment, but a sense that I'm doing something worthwhile, you know? Alright, now the first little bit of personal news to get out of the way is that I started a website through the only service that I could find that would let me make the website for free. As I grow and lean more into my pursuit into the world of comedy, I want to avail myself for more opportunities to open for others and possibly be an MC at some venues. And it's for this reason that I made a website, so that people can come see what I'm about. They can get like easy to find links to all of my social medias, or at the very least just get the handles so they can look it up themselves, and so that people can have a direct line of contact with me, or at the very least they get my email. This website of course can be found cjw-comedy1.odoo.com, and it is CJW Comedy 1 and not CJW Comedy, because CJW Comedy, I somehow messed up the formatting and it wouldn't let me delete the website, so I just remade it altogether. So CJW Comedy 1. And for those of you who do get this reference, Pudding is on the website. You just gotta find him. Of course, make sure you follow the show at Out Loud Comedy Podcast on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Those are the only places where I have any sort of like social media account, so if you see like an account claiming to be that literally anywhere else, it's not me. You can of course find me personally on social media at TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at CJW_comedy. You can find my YouTube at CJW comedy, no underscore. And you can find my Bluesky at cjwcomedy.bsky.social. As it stands currently, I do not have any planned shows. If that does change, I will let you guys know. I believe tomorrow openly mic at the Q Lounge is happening, so I'll try to make it out to that. And I can't remember if I had said this on the show last week, but I said I was going to try to make it out to the open mic at Little Nevada. Some drama kind of happened last week, so I kind of missed out on that, but I'm going to try to make it out to that this week. Well, I hope you guys all enjoyed this ad break, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this episode. I'm gonna stop for a minute and probably get something to eat. I don't think I've eaten today. That's a horrible realization to have. Anyway. Fuck, I love showered up. Alright, so now for the topic of this episode, which is why I believe that queer representation matters in comedy spaces specifically. The answer to that question is pretty much why I started this podcast to begin with. Before I even started this podcast, I kind of had this conversation with just a few comics here and there about how whenever you ask someone to like name 5 comedians, 9 times out of 10, those 5 comedians are all gonna be like straight men. It'll be shocking to even have one woman on the list, but nowhere in that top 5 will be any queer comedians. Pausing for a second to acknowledge the fact that on my phone, I just got a notification. House almost unanimously decides to release the Epstein files. Oh, Donald's so fucked. Oh, Donald is so fucked. He's so fucked. But enough about Bubba's boyfriend. I was about to make my point by listing the top 5 on the Rolling Stones top 50 comedians of all time, but 1, that came out in 2017, and 2, like, half of the people on that top 5 are currently canceled for very problematic things, so I'm just not gonna touch that one. Well, let's see here. According to Google, the most frequently cited and influential stand-up comedians of all time, according to most critics, are Richard Pryor, George Carlin, Eddie Murphy, Dave Chappelle, and Robin Williams. Robin Williams being I wouldn't say the best one on that list, but he's definitely the most wholesome. Other comedians frequently mentioned in top lists and recognized for their significant impact include Lenny Bruce, Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Steve Martin, and Bill Hicks. My point remains that I just listed 10 comedians who, according to a lot of lists, are like some of the best comedians of all time, and not one of them is a queer individual. I believe I've mentioned this previously in one episode, I can't remember which one, but for me, growing up, comedy was kind of an escape for me. It was kind of a coping mechanism that I had with when life really got stressful and shitty. And the main reason why I'm even pursuing comedy is because I kind of want to kind of provide that same escape for people, you know? And while I was growing up and watching all these comedians, I will admit not a single one of them, at least to my knowledge, was a queer individual. And that's just because they don't really seem to be represented in a lot of comedy spaces, unless you are going to an outright, like, made for by queer people, queer comedy show. The point that I'm making is that if you want to find queer comedy, you're not just going to stumble upon queer comedy. You have to actually go out and actively seek queer comedy. But that is to say that queer comedy hasn't had its moments here and there in mainstream media. As much as I hate talking about her because of all the bad shit that's come out about her. In 1997, like, Ellen DeGeneres really had kind of this pioneering moment where she came out on television through her sitcom. And there were a lot of sitcoms like in the 90s, such as like Will and Grace and Friends, which while they did lean very heavily on stereotypes, really did normalize the idea of having gay main characters, and really was just like a defining landmark thing of the late 90s and early 2000s. But then you have shows in the modern era such as like Hacks and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I think what I love about these shows is that like they have queer characters in the main ensemble, but like the fact that they are queer is not like used as like a joke or a punchline or anything like that. They just exist casually. And this is something that you really just don't see in a lot of mainstream comedy spaces. And one of many reasons I think why is just because a lot of comedy spaces that there are just aren't exactly queer friendly. Like, to give a good example, recently I was at an open mic and the MC there, he was kind of like doing a little bit of crowd work, he was like, cheer if you're like, I don't know, drunk right now, woo. And then he goes, cheer if you're gay, actually don't, I don't care. And then when I got on stage, I fucking called him out for that shit. And it's kind of hard to have queer representation in these spaces like this when you kind of get this permeating vibe of, fuck, should I even be here right now? Like, are people going to be mad at me for just existing in this space? And despite all of that shit, I still choose to put myself into those spaces, not because I believe that queer representation needs to, be there, but also because I don't give a fuck what you say to me. You can be an asshole, you can spit in my face, you can call me all the fucking slurs that you want, but that just gives me more of a reason to come to these shows if it's gonna fucking piss you off. I'm gay, my husband's trans, and your wife probably doesn't fucking like the jokes you make. The fuck you gonna do about it, asshole? I'm honestly forgetting where I read this once, but I read somewhere that historically a lack of queer representation in comedy stemmed from cultural intolerance, fear of backlash, and reliance on harmful stereotypes for jokes. And while there is that argument that a lot of comedians will make, which is well, they're just jokes, you don't gotta take them seriously. We get that they're jokes, but you need to understand that because of who we are and things that we've personally experienced, that's just trauma for us. Why the fuck would we find our trauma funny? I mean, as comedians, we find our trauma funny. Our trauma is what makes us funny, but that's kind of escaping the point a little bit. There have been times where I've talked with straight comedians about performing in queer spaces, and then they'll be like, yeah, I don't really perform over there. They don't like me over there. And seeing your material, I fucking wonder why. You'll make jokes about sucking dick and they'll be like, well, I'm not gay, but $20 is $20. Or they'll make jokes about are lesbians really gay or have they just not had the right dick yet? Or they'll say some stupid fucking shit yeah, it's so hard to find a job nowadays. Now they just want trans diversity hires. But then every single one of these fucking jokes will bomb. And then they'll be like, what, guys? It's just comedy. It's not real. Before I kind of lose track of the narrative here, the overall point that I'm trying to make is that queer representation matters. Of course it matters. All representation matters. But it's kind of hard for queer representation to exist in these spaces when queer people are genuinely afraid to go to these spaces because of shit like that. I sincerely hope I have gotten my point across, and I'm going to end this episode before all the jokes that I've been making about how, just send me your hate mail actually just becomes a bunch of people sending me hate mail. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Hope you tune into the next one. Please do me a favor and check out the show notes. There you're going to find our guest's social media as well as the stuff of my own that I'm plugging. I would like to give a shout out to my friend Morningstar for being the one to actually make the profile image for this podcast. Do you know of any other queer comedians that I should contact to see if I can get on this podcast? Let me know and I'll see if I can hunt them down. My name is Corbin Willmorth. Thank you for listening, and as a reminder, make sure you don't keep your head on straight.